உலகெங்கும் தமிழரின் பிம்பம் உங்கள் டிவி.
Welcome to CrossRoads on TVI. I'm Parthi Kandaval. Good afternoon, dear viewers. We hope you and your loved ones are keeping well. In today's show, we have the opportunity to speak with another potential mayoral candidate in next year's City of Toronto municipal election, Mr. David Soknacki. Some of you may be familiar with him. He represented an East End part of Scarborough for many years in the 90s and up until 2006. He also served as our previous Mayor David Miller's budget chief for 3 years. We'll be discussing the elements of the race next year and why he thinks he's the best choice. Following our interview, we'll have the opportunity to discuss the state of Carnatic arts within the Tamil youth in our community with 3 talented youth, Mayuran Thananjayan, Midran Manogaran, Nintarshan Kaneshaya. As always, we welcome your participation in our show. Call us anytime at 416-623-8100. Welcome, Mr. Soknacki. Thank you for making time.
Thank you, Parthi. Nice to be here.
To provide a context, what's your connection with our city, the City of Toronto?
Well, I guess first and foremost, my family came over in the 20s, long time ago, and I was born here in the western end of the city since '63. Made Scarborough home. I went to local high school and university at U of T, then Western, and then I became active in one of the ratepayer associations in Scarborough, my neck of the woods, around Markham and Lawrence area. And one thing led to another, and so I decided to run back in '91. And Parthi, it was a slaughter. It wasn't a loss that first year, but I came back. '94, I won in the city of Scarborough. And then I came back in when there was an amalgamated city in '99, and ran again and until I stood for 3 terms, and finally stepped down in 2006. And during that time at council, I not only represented, as you said, the electors in East Scarborough, but also was privileged to be Mayor Miller's budget chair for a term. As well, we had a number of initiatives at that time. We were able to reduce taxes for tenants and for business by putting in a long-term business plan, long-term strategic plan for the city, and some smaller items that I think are just as interesting. For instance, we brought in the Poet Laureate for the first time. But after 3 terms, I stepped down, and the federal government asked me if I had an interest in chairing a Crown Corporation at Downsview Park. And I said that I'd be pleased to do so, again as a service. And it was at a crossroads. It didn't have a direction. It was surrounded by protesters at the time, and council had a difficulty. And 5 years later, we left it with approval from both ratepayers associations, council, the OMB, the federal government. So we were proud of where we left that. And all that time, Parthi, I had my business in the background. So I was able to go back to my business, and which is where I am now. We extract the oils from spices and sell flavors. And then just to bring it up to date, if you don't mind, I've always kept in contact with former colleagues at the city, as well with a number of stakeholders. And during the last couple of years, particularly in the last year or so, a number of people have come to me and said, we need change, we need to bring the sides together. At the same time, the respect for the people's dollars and cents needs to be maintained. They see that unraveling. So they thought that with my skills of working together with council, and the business that I built up from scratch, that it would be worthwhile considering a run for the mayorship.
As budget chief, you're in an interesting position. You're a suburb councillor from Scarborough, and Miller, who's a downtown, representing the downtown, or formerly as a councillor. You're in an interesting position to see those 3 years. Following '06, a lot in the suburbs will argue that there was a disconnect between Miller's administration and thus the ascension of Rob Ford and the furthering of that disconnect. Could you speak to that relationship between the suburbs and Miller and what went wrong?
I think that you're quite right in overview. And I think what happened is that when David first came in as mayor, he came in wanting an outreach to make sure that it was all part, the entire city was part of where he wanted to go. And frankly speaking, I think that accounted for some of the invitation to myself. Somebody from Scarborough, somebody from the center-right part of the political spectrum, and somebody that didn't necessarily subscribe to all of the views that he believed to. And so what he did is there was an outreach then and a willingness to integrate things together. So just as an example, Parthy, out in the suburbs, there's a different sometimes a different perspective on things. Sometimes the suburbs have more volunteers working in city programs to make them work, whereas the downtown, sometimes there's more of a reliance on staff to make sure that the services are provided everywhere. There is greater densities downtown, but out in the suburbs, people really value things like sidewalks, snow clearance, vacuuming of leaves in some areas of Etobicoke, and so forth. What happened after that first term, what we ended up with is a concentration, in my mind, of strength in the mayor's office, and a recognition that perhaps he could achieve his agenda not by reaching out as much. And so what happens is that I think what happened is a more centralized administration. I thought for a whole bunch of reasons, including that I'd served for 3 terms, that it was time to move on.
Why did you leave in '06? You decided to retire from your position as a councillor.
Again, there's been this theoretical conversation about councillors staying and staying and staying and staying for 20, 30 years and so forth. And people have asked me what I thought, and I said, well, I think 3 terms is about right.
Okay. Maybe
1 more, but it's about right. And
do you think term limits is something that the province should consider in the?
I think that there is merit in it. At the same time, we now have a political class, and people jump from position to position, so I'm not sure what it solves. I think it's something that you may want to have as a theme on a show by itself, because it's an interesting topic. But for myself, I knew it was right, both for what I thought that I could achieve and where the administration was. And so I thought that after 3 terms, it was time for me to move on.
Within the Scarborough downtown discussion, or the suburbs downtown discussion, you're interesting in that you support LRT, where 9 out of the 10 Scarborough councillors and all the MPPs have supported the subway plan. What's your reasoning for supporting or supporting for the LRT extension?
Well, to be clear, it is this LRT in this set of circumstances, I think, serves more people, less expensively, better, faster, and certainly without a tax increase. But I will be the first to say that there are all sorts of places where, in fact, subways are better, or perhaps buses are better, or even pedestrian access is better. So if we want to take a look at this example, you say, okay, you've got a choice of 2 or 3 stops, depending on which subway plan you prefer, or 7 stops. You have a choice of serving all sorts of vulnerable communities on the LRT plan, including Centennial College, which really does need service, as opposed to serving essentially a plaza, which is a great hub, but at the same time, it's not the access that the others that the other offers.
The fear with a lot of Scarborough residents was that the LRT would cut into major arteries, major roads.
Perfect, and exactly, and the next point was that that LRT in fact went right up an existing allowance, so there's no interference either with the roads or with motorists' ways. And the last point, if you'll allow me, is that it's already paid for by the province as opposed to now requiring a tax increase. So for those reasons, I said in these circumstances, I thought and think that the LRT is the right solution. However, if we get closer to the downtown core, where the numbers are there, then I really believe that subways are the way to go. And one last thing, if I might. You know, I come from neighborhoods that people have chosen it as a lifestyle. And you know, whether we agree with it or not, it's important to them. Subways require high densities. They require those 25-story condos. And if the neighborhoods aren't prepared to see that pressure, then I would think that those neighbors would be better served by LRTs as well.
You've also called for a strategic review on policing in Toronto. Why?
We haven't done it for a generation. And by strategic review, I mean it's not the police taking a look at themselves. We've got excellent people in the police. I've got confidence in Chief Bill Blair. At the same time, we have not taken a look and said, what are our expectations as Torontonians for the police? What ought they to be doing at the top level? And I know we all say, well, solve crime, make sure our public safety is enhanced and so on. But at the same time, Parthy, take a look. We've had very great differences in the last generation as to what our priorities should be. Like, for example, domestic violence is considered far more a serious crime than it was before. And yet, on the other hand, rates of violent crime, including murder, have gone down from a generation. We take a look at the huge changes in technology, the huge changes in demographics, and the list can just go on.
Go on. Does that include, would your review include concerns, legitimate concerns from visible minority communities about racial profiling and in some cases police brutality?
Now, let's go right back up again and say, what's changed in the last generation? That is clearly a concern that's come up in the last generation. And it's one of those things, I don't want to prejudge what the answer is going to be or what the issues are going to come out. But the fact that you're raising it, others may raise it, I think makes it a legitimate issue for us to raise at the top level. And I think, if I may, it's the only way that the average citizen can say, this is important for us within the context of policing. How can we deal with it? And then have the police deal with it in a way that's not threatening or anti-police. It's a way that we all want public safety and we all want self-respect. And it's not that there's an either or. We can have both.
On taxing, many political commentators or observers would argue that we live in almost an anti-tax climate where, you know, politicians and leaders are seen as tax and spenders, and any increase in taxing is seen as politically unpopular. Would you be open for new revenue tools as a mayor to create the funding necessary for transit?
I think instead of revenue tools, I think we have to call them taxes. I think we have to recognize that while many people recognize taxes as toxic, transit is not free. And we have to figure out a way that is fair, that we can pay for it. Just the other day I was asked by one of the reporters whether I supported the new recommendations that have come from the Golden Task Force. My comment to that reporter was, we have to pay for it somehow. It has to be broad in such that every stakeholder section of our society feels that they have something to gain and that they contribute. And that includes motorists, that includes transit riders, that includes suburbanites and downtowners. And frankly, I think that if we put a package together, we have to say, this is how we get rid of the gridlock, because we have to pay for it. So just to very briefly answer your question, yes, I believe that we do have to talk about taxes. We have to also make sure that it is dedicated, and we have to make sure that it's absolutely fair, that it goes into what it's supposed to be.
In 2003, when many will argue it was a close race between David Miller and John Tory, you supported John Tory in that race. Going into next year, it's widely speculated John Tory will run again. In this case, why would you obviously not support him in next year?
Well, elections are about choices. And so what we've got is that we have the choices back in 2003 among who was declared was in favor, to my mind, of John Tory. Where we are right now is that there's only, as far as I know, 3 people declared or said that they will be running. And I think that there's a couple of front runners, John being one, Olivia being another, that right now are not actively promoting ideas or visions. Running, I think, the safest of campaigns behind the scenes, and frankly not addressing the types of issues that we need brought forward. And so what I see in myself is saying, I know people have choices, and on election day, of course, they will make their choices. But right now, we'll be focusing on our campaign and saying, here are the visions that we see. We've mentioned 2 of them already in terms of transit and public safety, and we'll be coming forward with more.
In next year's race, presumably Olivia Chow will officially announce or make her decision. And in that, it brings a new dimension of race into Toronto politics. Many in the suburbs, ethnic communities, will see her as a kindred spirit of sorts, given her life story, her immigration, and so forth. How would you answer that question in terms of appealing to ethnic communities for support, wherein that you will be seen as another white male seeking to be mayor of the city, in a city that's where the majority, or greater than 50%, are visible minorities?
Well, I'll start, as I started in the beginning, to say that we're all immigrants. And I guess the only difference between myself and other people is that my family came in the 20s of 1920s. Sorry?
What background is Sakna?
Eastern European.
Eastern, okay, sorry.
And it's in one of those countries right now that the borders change from time to time. But I've made a contribution to Toronto, as presumably my competitors have. I have represented in Ward 43 perhaps one of the most diverse ridings in the city, and I'm very proud of the track record that I've had. And you know, at the end of the day, as we said before, it's about choice, and people will not only judge myself but my competitors. I trust that they will be looking at issues and how each of us will benefit them beyond taking a look at which race we come from.
Okay. On that topic of your fellow competitors, would you argue that it's fair for suburbanites to think that Olivia Chow would be a continuation of David Miller's legacy?
I'm not going to focus on other people's campaigns, but I would like to, I know we've been chatting about the suburban downtown dichotomy. I'd like to sort of try to break that apart if I can and say, I think a more helpful way of taking a look at it is taking a look at it at different ways. For instance, at needs communities, whether they're downtown, uptown, or here in Rexdale or out in Scarborough. I think we need to take a look at needs communities as opposed to a downtown or suburban. I think we need to determine what the requirements are of each of the communities and say, you know, so this area needs this, that area needs that, and not so much look at a downtown suburbanite, because I think what will happen then is that you'll find people then switching between one and the other, taking turns, And I don't think that that's healthy for our politics. I think it'd be far more constructive to say, well, listen, let's talk about each community's needs, and then let's focus on that.
Okay, great. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today, but thank you, David, for coming on our show and sharing your thoughts, and best of luck next year.
Good, thank you,
Dear
Parthy.
viewers, please join us after these short announcements. Feel free to disagree. Welcome back, dear viewers. We'll now discuss the state of Carnatic arts within Tamil youth in our community with three talented youth, Mayaran Thananjayan, Saumya Vijayakumar, and Midran Manogaran. As always, please call us at any time at 416-623-8100 to share your thoughts and questions. Welcome. So, in our community, Carnatic arts is very dominant. Parents always look into enrolling their children at a young age. Do you think that's out of some sort of need to be cultural or classical? Why do you think that attachment exists in our community?
Definitely, I definitely agree with that. There is definitely within Tamil people, I would say in general, there's a need to preserve culture, and in that regard, Carnatic music. The knowledge of Carnatic music is a great way of preserving that culture, and it's a convenient method, and there are a lot of benefits from learning Carnatic music as well. So I would say that's a reason why parents choose to let their kids pursue this.
Midran, did you resist your parents' enrollment of your health in whatever the art
No,
is?
that's a great question. You find that with a lot of youth today, not with music, with any aspect. And like Myron said, to touch upon the one, we like to preserve our culture. We want to pass it on to the next generation. And given that we're on a foreign land, there's not much options for us to do that. But this is one of the options where we had a lot of accessibility. And when I mean by accessibility in this art, I mean by the very great educated teachers we'd have down here, and also just physical accessibility, like places to practice, places to perform, our temples, right? And on the earlier stages, yes, when I was younger, I started as a learning vocal, and I wasn't too satisfied around there. But I mean, as time went on, and as I got more deeper into the water and put my foot more in, the interest was there and the passion was there, and that's what's leading us, all three of us here today.
I mean, it's a regret I actually have. I studied flute for 4 years, but in grade 8 I resisted it, but also primarily because my guru changed, and as a result I didn't see the need to continue, and something I very much regret now. So coming to my question is the importance of the guru and student relationship. I wonder if you could speak to that, Saumya.
It definitely is very important, because your relationship with your guru is something, it's a bond that isn't easily, it's a bond that you need. You learn a lot, not just the music, but you learn values, you learn about your life, you learn how to cope with many life skills, and you learn everything. So the relationship you have with your guru is very important in learning the art, whether it's music or instrument. You need that bond, a strong bond with your guru, to be able to get to the next level and
It's like they help you open the door, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're that key that helps us to open the door, essentially.
Myron, many parents, they have trouble finding the right teacher or guru for their child, whether it's in dance, singing, or instruments. What would you recommend to a young parent how to choose the right teacher or right guru?
I would say the thing is, like, the first thing, if I was a parent and I was about to get my kid to learn Carnatic music, the first thing I'd look for in a guru is sincerity in the art. I'd look for someone who does it almost as a living. I would look for someone who is not really in it for the money. So something like that, like Midran.
Yeah, for sure. You know, if I was a parent, this goes with anything. You want to set goals, right? If I'm a parent, I'm going to say, you know, by the end of this year, I want my child to do this, and you just have to say, if my child was to learn from teacher X, does this align with my goals and where I want my child to be? And you know, some parents value this art differently. Some do it just to, you know, keep them out of trouble or as a form of discipline. Some do it because they want to see their kids as future performers on stage one day. So it really, it's a very interesting question. It could be debated on heavily, especially if you get down to specific names and stuff. And it really, it's
we
really
don't want to go there.
No,
Yeah.
for sure we don't.
Yeah.
But it's something that, you know, just depends on the specific case and what really aligns to their goals and what they want to get out of this.
Salmi, I'm an older generation from you guys, but some of my peers have become who've, you know, what we're called second generation. We've spent most of our lives in Canada. Some of you are probably born here. And they've become teachers and gurus now. And so you have a choice from young parents, is that do we choose a guru that grew up here or a guru that grew up back home? What are your thoughts on that question?
I feel like because I was born here, I did learn from teachers, various teachers from here, from India and all that, like a mix of it. So I think I had the experience of it. I feel like because we learned from teachers who have that cultural background from Sri Lanka or India mixed, we were able to get those values. So even now you can say that kids or students who are born here, they also possess those values. So they're able to pass it down to the next generation of students. So it doesn't really matter whether you were born here or you were born back home. You can still pass on the values, because I believe like all the students or people who are involved in the art that I know of, they're very much with their values, their traditional values, cultural values. They have that in them. So they're able to pass it down to the next generation.
Do you notice a difference in the quality of youth performances, whether it's singing or dance or instruments, from your time in India compared to our youth here?
Yeah, because it is different, but I think the reason for that, what I saw is there they focus mainly like 24 hours they're on music. You know, here we have to balance school, and then we have, you know, university studies, we have our work and everything, and we're balancing music. So when you look at that side of it, I feel like we're doing such an amazing job, because we're able to balance such great, you know, such a difference, because we're going to go to university. Like I was like, we'll balance maybe doing science, and then we're going to go back home and practice for 3 hours or whatever our music, and then have a concert the next day, or, you know, during Navaratri, those festivals, we have concerts every day, but we're still able to balance it. Whereas in India, they either focus on, like what I saw was, they either focus on their subject or they focus on the art, right? They take time out for that art, whereas we don't do that. We balance it. So I feel like that's a big thing.
In India, in Chennai, they have a 6-week-long music festival that lasts for 6 weeks, and it's considered, you know, the world's biggest music festival in South Indian or South Asian. Is there an appetite to create a similar program in Toronto that focuses on the classical arts?
Just to give some backlight, so we have to keep in mind that what has been building up in Chennai is years and years of work, and we're very fortunate, our generation, that our teachers and the generation before us, our parents' generation, they came here and did such a great job in implementing our culture. And one of the strongest ways that they've implemented it is through the art of Carnatic music. And we could even trace that right to the Raga Sangamam show, right? And having a show like Raga Sangamam, what that shows us is, yes, there is a market for that, and yes, there is a hunger for that, and there is, you know, potential. We do have talent both in quality and quantity, right? And there is a market, and to touch on that, the one thing that is, there is groups that are continuously, you know, trying to promote that, and it is something that will be built upon the years.
Is there Myron, if you could speak to, is there an organization, pardon my ignorance, that coordinates all classical art organizations or teachers in Canada or in Toronto, in the GTA? Or is it a hodgepodge of different teachers, different organizations?
It's basically a hodgepodge, but like basically, like we have many organizations here that they all promote Carnatic music. There are organizations such as Bharati Kalamandram, Tamilisai Kalamandram, as you may know, and recently there's also been a group that's formed called the Carnatic Youth Society of Ontario, in which we are also a part of.
Carnatic Youth Society of Canada.
Sorry.
Okay. And is your objective to create a platform for all Carnatic youth,
Right, so-
despite which teacher they go to, which organization?
Right. So I guess there's the point of this group is we're 20 passionate university students who have come together for one reason, and that's to promote the art and through a passion for the art. There's nothing in it for us, really. I mean, financially or anything. It's just that one passion that we really have, that our teachers, our gurus, our parents, the people around us have installed in us. And first off, I think we should all be proud of ourselves because, you know, this is something that we've never had before in this art form, and it's finally coming through. But yeah, the point of this group is ultimately to encourage all youth within Canada who are involved in the Carnatic art. That could consist of anybody from any teacher, any background, whatever it is. But ultimately, I think one of the greatest things that we want to accomplish, and the 20 of us were able to accomplish already, is to build a strong network within our youth system. And that goes beyond the art. It goes almost to a friendship. Building, and that's something that, you know, we just want to build within our community, and that's what's going to really, you know, when one speaks, not everybody's going to listen, but when we hold our hands together and speak, we will turn heads.
Definitely. And in terms of creating like a certain presence, in terms of whether it's a festival or an annual event that showcases the talent, is it necessary? Do you think it's only possible through the second generation, or do you think it's necessary to create something that encompasses all the Carnatic groups?
Again, like, sorry if I misunderstood the question, but basically, as Soumya was talking about before, we lead a very like hectic life because we have to balance school and work, and at the same time we balance music. So like in order to get that sort of that preservation there, like we have to like come together and like work together.
Also, Carnatic music and the arts are based in a spiritual or divine context. What are the spiritual benefits do you find from your practice of your art, and how does it encourage your connection to God,
you know,
if it does?
More than God, I think one of the biggest disciplines, and you know, you could trace this back to almost any extracurricular activity, whether it be sports or, you know, drawing or music. It's a form of discipline. It keeps us, you know, safe away from the roads. It keeps us keeping our minds focused. And you know, there's a lot of people even strongly believe that people who are in this art or play a sport are more successful, like face less challenges academically, one may argue. You could correct me if I'm wrong on that. I'm not a scientist who studies that, but it's, in terms of religion, you know, I can't speak for everybody else, but definitely, you know, the art is circled around our devotion and bhakti towards the gods and goddesses of Hinduism, and it does definitely, you know, play a key factor in our involvement in that religion, but I can't speak for anybody else.
Soumya, how have you found your relationship with God or religion?
Definitely there's a big a big bond between religion and the Carnatic music for me, because when you look into the meaning of the songs and all that, it tells you stories, and you learn about the stories through the songs. So you get curious, right? You want to know more. You're like, okay, if it's a song about Krishna, you want to know why the song was written this way, and why, for example, Tyagaraja wrote this song about Raman and why he felt that way. So we get curious as to why they wrote songs about the gods this way and how they're describing them. You learn about the descriptions, and it's really beautiful the way that songs have been described. So.
It's time for a short break. Dear viewers, join us after these brief announcements, and we'll be discussing the role of Arangetams in Carnatic music. Welcome back, dear viewers. On this segment, we are joined with Myron Thananjayan, Nitarshan Kanishaya, and Midran Manogaran, and we're speaking and discussing about the role and state of Carnatic arts within Tamil youth in our community. There's a lot of debate in Tamil living rooms and presumably over the winter holidays about Arangetrams. You know, many have commented that this thing of a junior Arangetam is a new trend. Is that so? Do you think it is? Is it justified? What are your thoughts, Midran?
You know, it's it could be a two-way discussion really. You know, there's always going to be points from both sides. The positive definitely, what I'd like to share today is the Arangetam. We should see it as almost like a Kickstarter to a career, and for a lot of the youth here, you know, maybe it could be a lack of chances, or we just don't know their, you know, the name's not out there. And what the Arangetam really does is it takes someone who's, you know, putting so much effort into it, puts them on the stage, and it's almost like a showcase to the rest of the world that, you know, I'm serious about this art. My guru has trained me properly and has enough trust in me to allow me to perform a full concert, right? And really what this junior Arangetam is showing is that our teachers are really trying to take the next step to promote our youth here and really put them out on the stage to say, you know, these are my students, they have talent. And,
But
you know,
is that a violation of the history of Carnatic music, that you only do a full performance once you're deemed suitable, which is at the end?
well, you know, there's always, you know, you could look at history, but then there's always being modern. And this is just a new movement maybe, right? And maybe that's how we can look at it. And how I see it as, it's a positive impact, definitely. A lot of these kids that do an Arangetam get inspired, right? When they see themselves in a stage playing with such a great artist, with such great accompanying artists, they say, wow, if I could do this, I could do it all. And it really, more like just innerly, they say to themselves, it gives them that boost. And to the rest of the world, you know, they all see their talent, and it's a chance for them to get out of that nest and perform. Right?
And to argue, like, definitely, I don't believe it's a violation at all, because if you even go back to the olden days, there are people in India who never had anything called an Arangetam. It was just a build-up of performances that got them famous. So in a way, like, a junior Arangetam, in my view, is like what Midran said, like a Kickstarter to a career. And even from a psychological point of view, we're talking about, let's say, if the kid was not interested, and if they did this junior Arangetam, they may actually come to realize the benefits and the psychological benefits of learning Carnatic music, and they may get interested into it.
And one common criticism that teachers face, or anybody in this art could face, is, you know, we're just throwing out Arangetams like it's Christmas gifts kind of a thing, right? And, you know, we almost see Toronto as like the summer season for Arangetam, right? Almost every Saturday, Sunday, Friday. Hey man, what are you doing? Let's go to a movie? No, I'm going to be at this guy's Arangetam. Then I have to go to that Arangetam. People may frown upon that, but really for me, that brings a smile to my face, because what that shows is, you know, the more kids we have out there, it shows that there's that many more kids who are serious about the art. And
But are we sacrificing quality over quantity?
That really depends on what your standard of quality is. You know, some people might say, it depends really what your mindset is going, right? Typically when I go in, I don't set expectations for anybody. That's how I like to be, because I try to be as positive minded as possible. Quality can be a concern to someone. That's something that it's going to be faced upon this art at all times. But more than quality, what an Arangetam, the message it ultimately sends to me is, hey, this kid is serious. His guru is proud to put him on the stage and give him a chance to fully perform. He potentially has a chance of, you know, taking up this art seriously and being a performer and representing our people, our nation, and just altogether the hard work that our teachers and ultimately that our culture has been putting in this foreign country here. And all three of us here on stage today is really a prime example of the hard work that the Tamil culture has put in here. We are the products of some of the hardest work they put in here.
Definitely, definitely. Nitarshan, what are your thoughts on if you're a guru at one stage in your life and there's a student that didn't really meet your level of quality or a general sense of quality, would you let that student perform in Arangetam?
I think that maybe I'm not sure if he would be ready for an Arangetam, but maybe, like they said, junior Arangetams are just chances for them to go perform on stage. That would maybe, obviously they'd start practicing for that, and once they start practicing, they realize, oh, I can actually achieve this. And then once they start doing small programs, then maybe they can get the ability to do an Arangetam in the future.
Right.
Should a teacher ever say, no, you're not ready to do it?
Well, as their teacher, they definitely have the right to gauge their students' talents. But of course, like in my personal opinion, in no way should there like be any restriction on where they can perform. Like because the only way that we can build up that sort of atmosphere, stage atmosphere, is through smaller performances.
Are you a sports guy?
Yeah.
It's like a coach, right? You know, a coach is not going to play you in at point guard unless if he thinks you could play point guard, and that's really, I mean, that's a terrible analogy, but that's the best I could try to relate to you right now.
It's
but
a good analogy,
you know,
but some will argue that, you know, the parents are giving a lot of money to this teacher over the course of years, and there's a slight expectation for
right, and it really depends on what their expectations are. Different teachers work differently. I don't, you know, I just as a human being, I don't work the same way as Myron, and neither do I as Nidarshan. And that goes with teachers, right? They have different expectations for their students, and that may vary per student, right? And parents have different expectations, and ultimately, at the end of the day, those are the two key factors that should be affecting, you know, whether or not my son or my student is ready to do the Arangetam. And tracing back to all of that, it should just, if those two parties, the parents and the teacher, feel comfortable spending this much money, putting their kid on stage for a 3-hour concert in front of a huge crowd, by all means.
I'm an elementary school teacher.
Right.
Though I don't teach music, I see my kids go through their music class, and I notice our music curriculum is very Western classical based. Growing up, did you see that dichotomy, that difference between what you learned at home or in the weekends than what you were exposed to in elementary and high school? And did you question the validity of your own music against what's presented as classical, meaning Western composers?
Yes, I did see there were a lot of differences, but it also helped me. You know, like look at both musics in a different perspective, and it also helped me connect both of them. So since I already had the background of some Carnatic music growing up, I was able to connect and use my knowledge to help me with my Western music. And some people can debate on saying if it's not the right decision to be studying Western and classical at the same time. But I disagree with that because I feel like music is music. You should be able to enjoy all kinds of music. Just because you're a singer doesn't mean you sing only Carnatic music. But that doesn't mean that you have to change yourself, right? Your music can be shown within your Western. Oh, see, he can bring some classical touch into this. And then, but that it's, I'm not sure how to explain this, but
I think what he ultimately means is, you know, a lot of the greatest musicians always say, if I'm a Carnatic musician, if you only listen to Carnatic music, you're really exposing yourself to such a limit, right? The greatest musicians in the world allow themselves to listen to really everything, and they may take ideas from here. When they listen to a piece of artwork, even if it's not Carnatic music, they say, hey, these are the goods. This is what I could give me ideas, and this is what I could use, and these are the bads. This is what I think don't. And the study of music and how it appeals to, you know, our audience is really interesting, and it really just depends on finding your style in your music, and that may include really taking some parts from other styles. And, you know, to touch back to your question about how it works in the school environment and all that, in my case, like, you know, I know a lot of my teachers recognize that I was, you know, taking such private classes outside, and during, like, you know, regular, like, I forgot what they're called, assemblies, that's what they're called in elementary school. Yeah, during assemblies, I used to perform with, like, you know, the I forgot what they're called, those groups, and it was orchestra, that's right, orchestra. And, you know, definitely, like, the teachers were very welcoming, and Toronto schools are very welcoming. We found a way to incorporate that, so definitely there was a welcoming environment, and it was a win-win situation for both sides.
Myron, do you think that schools should explore offering it as part of the curriculum and looking to hire, you know, many of our teachers, or some are Tamil in the school system, and should they offer this as part of the music curriculum, whether at elementary or high school level?
Definitely. And this is not only limited to Carnatic music, it can be applied to any sort of world music. Just like, so as you know, Toronto is a multicultural society, and we grew up learning about different cultures, different languages. So in that regard, we should definitely learn about the different types of music out there. So I would say it's very important to actually add that to our curriculum.
And not on the elementary level, just to add, I'm not too sure about the specifics. However, I know that York University does offer some Carnatic music-based courses that's run by Professor Dr. Sangila Kelanidhi Tirchi Shankaran sir. So I don't know the specifics, but I mean, it is glad to know that there is some sort of accessibility, and we are slowly getting up through the systems.
And so what advice, Natasha, would you have for the 7th grade student watching who is going to classes because his parents are making him? What would you?
Well, there is a stage in life where some people are just like, okay, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. But once they start realizing how important it is, how much it affects them, then they start getting the passion of, well, continuing their music, right?
And Midran?
Yeah, no, really, it's not just at music. I see this with anything. It could be with school too. When I was a kid, I hated school. Now I love school. It's just about really finding your rhythm, finding your passion. For some of us, it might just be going to one concert and seeing Unni Krishnan sir and saying, I want to be like him. For some of us, it's, I want to be like him, or I want to do this, I want to accomplish this, I want to sing at Music Academy one day, I want to win this award. Everybody, they find that inner passion in the art. It might not necessarily be in the art, but it's just something that will be honed or developed over time. There's a very few cases of kids who at a young age say, I want to go into this field and do this. So
it's time to wrap up, but Myron, if you can perhaps share the details for next week's concert.
Sure. So we're actually we're going to have our opening showcase event. It's going to take place Saturday, December 21st at Scarborough Sai Center from 5:30 to 9:30. And we're going to have all of our youth, many of our youth perform. We're going to have vocalists, violinists, mridangists, a whole bunch of instruments.
And definitely, I encourage everybody to definitely come out to this event, and I hope to see everybody there. Come and support your youth. It is your youth, and it's the audience that make us musicians. So hope to see everybody there.
Thank you, Myron, Nitarshan, Midran, and Saumya. Dear viewers, as our community plants deeper roots in Canada, we recreate and create our Tamil Canadian society. It is important that we better and further understand our past, present, and future. I hope today's show helped shed some light on that. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Parthi Kandavil. Have a good week.
தமிழரின் பிம்பம் உங்கள் டிவி.